What if you could actually shave years off your goal towards earning 100K in passive income and retiring? Hi, I'm Jared Krause.
And I'm Sam Powell, and we are the hosts of Property Pals Australia. And in this episode, we're going to be discussing how you can actually use a residential property to help you get into a commercial property. And I guess the complexities around making sure it's the right decision for you, but also how you can actually do it. It's quite interesting. We share a few stories and a few examples, and it's not as hard as you think.
Yeah, we actually use numbers and calculations on if you were to start at like buying a $500,000 residential property, what it could look like in terms of capital growth and you either not adding income or savings towards the portfolio or just allowing the portfolio to grow in itself, and what that could look like in terms of how many years and how many properties you may or may not want to purchase to get to that 100K in passive income, with nuances around like lending and LVRs for commercial deals. So there's so much value in this pod. I'm sure you guys are going to love it. Understand this is not the only way that we can help you for free. Please head to our website. That's our email. Head to propertypals.au/resources, where we share how to maximize your borrowing capacity mini course that we've got. This will help you supersede probably what your actual time frame may be to get to your 100K passive income by getting a higher borrowing capacity to purchase better assets in the residential space and move into commercial. So
yeah, also check it out and leave us some questions at hello@propertypals.au. There's the email address.
Thanks.
See you on the inside.
Welcome to Property Pals, the podcast where we share everything around how to build a property portfolio, from researching areas, financing, structuring, buying, selling, and reinvesting to live a life of financial independence. As a disclaimer, any information shared by myself, Jared, Sam, and the Property Pals team is strictly general and should not be taken as constituting professional advice. You should consider seeking independent legal, financial, and taxation advice from a qualified professional.
Green means go, Rocky.
Green means go, Rocky. Matchy matchy. Is that off?
Paw Patrol.
What is it?
Paw Patrol.
Paw Patrol. It's when you know you're in full parent life. All right. Let's get into speaking about commercial property. Why or how to build a commercial property deposit using residential property. First, why commercial property? Like, why should we move from residential to commercial? What are the pros? What are the cons?
Yes, we covered a lot about residential, and that's generally the frameworks for strategy is building those foundational assets initially, and then why commercial? Well, cash flow is the biggest key, and there's a lot of people running around there hunting for cash flow, and you can get commercial really right and you can get it really wrong. So it's obviously what we want to try and educate moving forward is how to get it right, and there's some really great people out there, so we're going to try and interview them as well to pick their brains to help educate you as much as possible, so you're going in with your eyes wide open. But yeah, the initial thought process is building a commercial property deposit using residential property investments. It's a pretty key strategy, right? So
before we get into that, I don't want to rush into it. I want to do some foreplay here.
Okay.
Just to get people excited and understand why commercial. Like, all right, let's just stack up a $1.5 million home versus a $1.5 million. Say you've got borrowing capacity. It's a different thing because you can have a different deposit, right? But a $1.5 million home, how much is that going to make you as in a property investment in residential versus a $1.5 million commercial? So how much? So say you buy a $1.5 million home, how much is that going to cost?
$1.5 million.
Yeah. Good. I like it. In terms of deposit.
Well, I mean, you can get a deposit up to 90% for 1.5, but
so that's let's just
so
say
10%, 150 grand.
Yeah, 10% 150 grand. So yeah, let's just say 90%, right? 90% LVR for that. You've got, for round figures, for my brain and everybody else listening, 150k deposit.
Yep.
All right.
But you need to have obviously the serviceability to
be able to pay that.
Yeah, to pay the $1.35 million in debt that you need to have.
Yeah.
And
what would roughly a $1.5 million home? I know it's going to be different depending on where that home is, but like on average, what would you expect on average for a rental income per week?
$1,000 a week.
So you're probably going to be a bit negatively geared on that as investment property. Is that right?
Heavily.
Because
it's not. That's your gross, and then you got your council rates, maintenance, management fees, things like that.
Heavily when you think about all those costs. So then the next question is: at what stage, what size property, residential property, do you stop investing in? Like, is it 800 grand? Is it 900 grand? Is it $1 million before it becomes neutral to negatively geared?
So I was just doing some calculations for the next question. I'm assuming you're going to be asking me around the commercial side. So do you want to say that one again?
Let's go through what's in your head.
So I thought you were going to ask me, well, what does a commercial property bring in? On a weekly basis, if you're at 6.5% net yield on a commercial, that's bringing in $1,875 a week. So extra $875.
How much is that a year?
$97,500.
Okay, so just say 97k. All right. So a $1.5 million property can bring you in $97,000 net income per year versus a $1.5 million residential property, which would be heavily negatively geared, probably by like $500 a week or something.
Just pulling figures out of your backside there.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, it's just negatively geared, right? Like, no matter what, even if it's neutral, and you got to a point where you bought something exceptional, as a property investment, it's neutral. So you can see the difference. You can really grow your wealth quite fast with commercial because the net yield is definitely superior.
Yeah, your cash flow is better.
And that's where people get ahead a lot faster. So then my next question was, what stage or what size residential property do you stop investing in and move over to purchasing a commercial property? Like, for example, if you can get borrowing capacity for if you can buy an $800,000 house or a $1 million house, when does it become more of a liability as a residential investment in terms of liability being negatively geared?
It's just opportunity cost, right? Like, you can go down that. You've got the borrowing capacity for $800,000 purchase. The roadblocks with commercial is that you do need that larger deposit. So I always like to compare apples with apples. With so if you've got a $1.5 million purchase capacity, commercial, you're looking at a 30% deposit. So if you sort of go down that path of the same with resi, the next question is really like, well, what is your household income and what's your goals essentially? Because the trade-off generally is the capital growth is greater in residential, but the cash flow is better in commercial. So looking at that front, it's a lot of people. That's why I like to balance portfolios with residential and commercial, because you get the best of both worlds. And at the end of the day, you want to be aiming towards a passive income goal, because that's what's going to help you retire or get out of that position that you're in. And commercial is the fastest way to do that. It's using residential to help fast track that process. So as
a starting point.
Yeah, because so if you're going a $1.5 million asset on a commercial front, then you're looking at what's that, $450,000 as a deposit? Yeah,
because guys, just so you know, it's normally like the best. There are nuances to this, but like normally it's a 75% LVR, right? Or
generally 70
or less.
You can go 80 in commercial.
And you can get no doc loans and lease doc loans and things like that. There's shades of grey, and we're trying to make this as black and white as possible for us to conceptualize and you guys to conceptualize as well. But there's so many shades, and yeah, it's a big jump to get to let's just say $1 million property, right? $1 million property, you're gonna need like $350K in cash, because you're going to need entry costs as well. You're going to need you highly suggest using a commercial buyer's agent, and then you're going to have stamp duties and fees for entry costs as well. So you're going to need your deposit plus entry costs.
Yep. Yeah, and the biggest barrier that people hit in that front, so going back to your example, you've $1.5 million, do I buy a residential 1.5, do I buy a commercial 1.5? If I had that, objective, a $1.5 million residential asset, if you're just looking at a detached house, it's not the best, because from a compounding growth perspective, you want to be playing in that sort of 750 to below mark, because it's more affordable. Therefore, the capital growth prospects are higher because more people can afford that, and also in down periods, in economic hardships, those lower priced properties don't get affected as much, because people still need somewhere to live. So it's a sort of a risk mitigation strategy. The commercial side, the biggest issue is if you're looking at a $1.5 million purchase, you're looking around 450 grand in cash or equity to do that. Most people get to that point if you've got your bank account staring at you with $450,000 in cash. It's hard to get to, because people, they look at it and go, oh, well, let's go on a holiday, let's go do this, let's go buy a new boat, let's buy a bigger house, and they're not actually taking that time to reflect, to go, well, what's our 10-year goal, what's our 20-year goal? They're kind of just the shiny ball syndrome, marketing, social expectations. I'm doing well with my big car, my big house, and I'm still doing that job that I probably hate, or I might hate, but hey, no one else is going to pay me that money to...
Isn't it funny to think, like, if you could just get 450 grand in cash, we'll talk about how you can get 450 grand, not just cash in your bank account, but different ways as well, using property, residential property to get there. But isn't it funny to think that, all right, if I get 450K that I can use to buy a commercial property, I can get 97 grand a year in net income. That's replacing my job, if not sometimes better for some people that say they're earning an 80K wage, right? You're getting a net income of almost 100 grand. And so that
That's a good question. I want to throw out there is, if someone gave you 450 grand today,
how would you spend it?
What would you do with it? How would you spend it? Are you the person that would just go and spend it all and then have that really good 12 to 24 month period in your life?
So such a good question.
Or would you go and buy that asset that's going to give you a residual or a passive income of $97,000 year on year, and essentially, over a 10-year period, you could pay down the rest of the debt, and then your income would increase, so therefore it could even be higher. So, and with rental increases as well, inflation, all that. So it's kind of like saying, would you spend it now, or would you take the lower $97,000 a year on year for the rest of your life?
Yeah. And I've got one more thing of like carrot dangling or foreplay of why you guys should move into commercial faster. If you can, and you've got that risk appetite for it, is that, and I want to tout this against what so many residential buyers agents are pushing for, is buy 10 properties fast. Or the goal is most people want to get to 100K in income, passive income from property, and retire, right? Now, most residential buyers agents, they're really good at buying residential property. Great, good on you guys, but it's not the only strategy, and that's what they're pushing people, is to buy as many residential properties as possible to get, and buy them as fast as possible to get them to 100K in passive income. Obviously, the faster you buy them, the better off you're going to be further down the line, but you can get to this goal faster if you don't buy 10 to 20 residential properties by mixing in commercial. For example, you could buy 2 to 3 residentials, sit for a little bit, maybe 5 to 6 years, maybe 8 years, and then go buy, depending on what you buy and stuff, but then you can go buy a high cash flow commercial property. So
Yeah, with the equity in the residential portfolio that you've already built. So it's not your cash, it's the equity in that portfolio that you use as a deposit. And that's kind of what we're talking about, is how do you build that commercial property portfolio side of your portfolio? Yeah. Poor choice of words. Yeah.
So let's hash that out, right? Because somebody buys, let's hash it out. Let's try hash it out linearly for everybody here listening. Guys, understand there's going to be nuance to this. There's going to be different market conditions and all these different things compared to like the prices you start out at. But let's just say somebody buys their first property at 500 grand, a residential property of 500 grand. That's their starting step. Where do we, let's give maybe two case scenarios on how they could get to a 1.5 million, or let's just say a 400k equity or 450k in equity and cash, around that range, to get to a commercial deal. So take it away, I guess. I'll jump in with some nuances and different things, but I guess if you buy a $500,000 property with 100k cash in residential, you leave that for, let's just say it grows for, should we go 8% a year?
Yeah.
8%. Obviously, residential buyers agents are typically achieving higher than 10% ROI, or 10% capital growth per year. Typically, I have seen most buyers agents achieve higher than 10%. But should we stick with, say, 8% to be conservative?
Yeah, I run my growth figures off 8%.
Yeah,
in Australian average is 6 to 8%, so I take the high range on that. But yeah.
So with that, say we buy a 500k property and it's neutral after all expenses and everything like that, right? So it's not negative, it's not passive. But let's just say a 500k times 8% a year, which is 40 grand a year in capital growth over, say, 5 years, you got 200k, right? Now, let's just say that is growing in value. When do we buy another residential property? We've already almost halfway there after 5 years, right? So do we buy another residential property, Sam? And how would you suggest somebody get to this 450-ish K range?
Yeah, well, I generally like to see 2 residentials in a portfolio, and that's just my personal opinion, right? If you go too early into the commercial, because there are risks involved in it, and then the capital growth prospects is, you can go straight into commercial. You get that really great cash flow, and then you can just go commercial, because you're just focusing on cash flow.
Yeah,
and that is good to a certain extent. However, from a risk perspective, I like to see both resi and commercial. And as the buyer journey generally goes, is that they save up that $100,000 for that initial deposit. That's not going to really get you much in a commercial sense. That's got capital growth prospects as well as income, because you do need that high deposit rate. So it's kind of getting that safety net in place, so setting your foundations. So you're going to have those, 2 residentials is a nice sort of foundational where you're diversified into different markets, you're getting capital growth. You're also understanding how the finance works, how property works, having tenants, and getting comfortable with that scenario, and then going into a commercial play. So, waiting 5 years, I'd say you'd probably want to go into a second residential prior to amplify that growth, because then if you've got 2 properties going at 40 grand a year, you're going to get there faster from that front. And then you're looking into, what can we do with the equity in this portfolio? It gets to, after a few years, you're getting them valued. If you're getting into a good growth location, then it amplifies that, so it doesn't take as long. But then you start weighing up your options, going, what is the next best path, and what can we can afford? And I'd always push to go, let's go speak to a investment savvy commercial mortgage broker to see what those options are, and then go for a hunt, right? What's available.
Yeah, well, let's take it back a bit. I agree, but how do we get there, right? We can't do it from one property. So what's our next step? Do we go, all right, let's wait from 500k, a 500k property, that's growing at 8% a year. Do we go, and that's 40 grand in capital growth a year, and it's neutral. Do we, and this is purely an example, after 3 years' time, technically we've got 120k in equity, right? Do we go, and that's without adding any of your own savings over 3 full years? I would suggest people, if they want to really fast track this, is number one, buy in a higher growth location, of course, but also number two, add your own personal income as savings to your property portfolio. But let's just say conservatively, without adding anything in, you can buy a second property in 3 years for 120k, and say you buy another 500k property. That's round figures. So then you've got 2 properties growing for you, right? And then let's just say they're growing at, you know, I know the first one, it's already been 3 years, so it's probably at like, what do we got? It's probably worth a bit more, but you've added that debt on. So let's just like put that aside. Say it's still neutral, not passive and not negatively geared. And then you've got another 500k asset. So you've got one 500k asset that you've just bought, and the first one that you bought for 500k, which is technically worth like around 600-ish k probably now. After that 3 years, you've got a 600k property growing at 8%, and then you have a 500k property growing at 8%. So if you do those figures, this is how I like to think about it. I don't know if you do it differently, Sam, but like, so you've got 1.1, right, times 0.08, and this is being conservative. So you're getting 88 grand a year in capital growth, right, being conservative. So then you've got how many years, if you go 450 divided by 88,000,
5 or something.
Yeah, so it's like just under 5 years without you putting any extra money into it, right? That's big caveat. Like if you put more money into it, you can grow a lot faster, and we're using 8% growth rate. Typically, you get more when you use a good buyer's agent. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We can refer you to some that are not us ourselves that you can use, and so that's a path to get to a commercial property in 7 years' time, with buying 3 assets, 2 resis, and buying 1 commercial at the end of it, versus trying to buy a lot of resis at the start and waiting 10 plus years or 15 years before you can retire. So you understand, like, we're having a dig at these buyer's agents, the residential ones that just do residential, right? We recommend them to start off with. But think about your wealth journey independently, and move to different areas and assets that you can get you to your goals faster.
And that going full circle, commercial is not in everyone's goals either. So it depends on the individual.
Yeah.
But if you're like Jared and you're like, you know, you're really pushing it to get that passive income side of it, because then it can round out your portfolio and you get good diversification, then yeah, commercial is an amazing vehicle to go down that path. And it's kind of like you can go and buy a whole bunch of residentials, but if you just wait those few years, allow the market to do that heavier lifting, and then it's getting you into a more of a more income generated investment, then it doesn't stop your residential journey there. It just adds fuel to the fire, because now banks are looking at the higher income that's coming in from your commercial and your 2 residentials and your household income, and then you can go further and further, because there's going to be a blockage after generally 3 to 4 residentials where you don't have the cash flow to service anymore. So people have to go and look for those higher income plays, and generally they start going into that commercial space or rooming houses. There's a lot of traps in that path where they've got the properties, they want more and more, they can't service it, they get a bit annoyed, and then they start looking for alternative strategies, and they go down a funnel of potentially someone who's not going to give them the right level of advice, because it's not they might not know the right journey, or they only know one product to push and they're pushing you somewhere where it may not be right for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's just based on buying 2 properties, right? Like, and so year 3, you buy an 88. You buy another property, right? So you got that 600k property that you first bought, It was for 500. It was 500k, and then you got another 500k property. You got the 1.1 mil in debt, and you've got, or in property value, I should say. Sorry, and then you've also got. Say you wait one more year, and that grows in equity of 88 grand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say it's 90 grand because you get like one property is like an extra % of growth rate. And then you also slap 10 grand into, you've saved up 10 grand over your 4 years. That's a 4-year journey to get to there. Say you've saved up for another 10 grand, awesome. That's 5 grand a year that you're able to save. Then you can contribute to a deposit. You got 100k that you can go buy another property, right? After year 4, that is. And then, then you've got, like say you buy a 500k property in year 4, then you've got $1.6 million in property value times 0.08, and you're getting 128 grand a year in capital growth, roughly. So then you might be able to move a little bit faster. So you go 450 divided by 128, then it's 3.5 years on top of the 4 years. So it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 7.5 years, I guess, but you got more residentials. So I guess there's different ways that you could do it, right? This is what I'm just trying to share some different strategies that people can use to get to a higher income asset, and without having to add too much more to the property portfolio other than their first deal.
Well, each residential that you purchase is going to require a deposit, and each time you go into that next residential, you're eating away at that deposit that you can essentially use for your commercial. So the commercial, because it requires that larger deposit rate, it requires probably more time of you sitting on the sidelines doing nothing, which it might be difficult for some really active people. If you are really active, then let's look at the portfolio that you've got. If you've got 2 or 3, 4 is really good too. 4 residentials going to a large commercial. It really depends on obviously individual circumstances. But I'd sit there and go, like with the house that you've got in Ipswich, the play there was to convert it from a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom. If you had, say, $10,000, you can do that conversion.
Yeah.
You're increasing your cash flow from your rental perspective and your capital value. So then you're going to have more capital to draw down upon, greater cash flow to help draw down upon that.
Yeah.
And that can fast track you into that commercial play. And that's not requiring large deposit rates to hold more assets. It's just being smart with what you've got.
Absolutely. And I could also sell that property after doing the reno and then take whatever capital I get from the sale. If I sell at the right time in the market, I can then go and just maybe purchase a commercial deal. And that's a really good shout, Sam, is like, we're just talking about 2 to 3 properties that you could buy in a 7 or
5 to 7 year
7 year period that can get you to commercial.
That can get you to a passive income of 100 grand.
Yeah, exactly. And that is without you buying something that has its conservative 8% growth rate, and without buying something you said is like, it could be a value add. You could buy something with a value add, do a renovation on it, and then boost the value of it a lot quicker, right? This is, I believe, is a conservative approach. I don't know, what do you think? And also,
I'm risk averse, man. I'll take it really slow and steady.
And I think most people should understand what their risk tolerance is. Like if they're listening to like me and like, oh, I want to go fast and stuff, like if it makes you anxious and nervous, like it's not the thing. Like the goal here is you want to get to 100k passive income so you're not stressed, right? So the goal isn't 100k income per year. Right, it's like the goal is really no work and no stress. That's what the real goal is. We're just talking about the vehicle. Who cares about the money, right? So my question to you is, I've talked about this and we've shared some strategies here. Where can what am I missing? Like what are the things that I like could be missing? What are the risks there?
Before we continue today's pod, I want to ask you a few questions. What is your property investment goal? What type of properties do you want to own? How many? What size valuation property portfolio do you want to own? And how much in net income do you want to be earning? Essentially, what's your magic number in passive income that you want to be earning? And do you know how to get there? And if you do Do you know how to get there in the least time possible with the least amount of risk?
Sam and I have been helping people invest in property and build property portfolios for years. People who are now replacing their income through property, and we want to help you do the same. Right now, for a limited time, we are offering free property coaching to our listeners. We won't be able to do this forever, of course, so head to propertypowers.au/coaching. That's propertypowers.au/coaching to see how we can help you achieve your investment property goals. Link will be in the description too.
Well, the risks are going into commercial too soon, and we'll do a whole session on this. Commercial, because it is so heavily based around the business cycle, you can get downturns, and it obviously depends on the asset type as well, because you're reliant on a single business or more likely I'd like you to see, like if it's a $1.5 million purchase, having at least 2, maybe even 3 tenants in that one commercial premise, so therefore you're reducing that risk if they do vacate for some reason, that you're still getting income out of it. But that's the risk, is you can buy an asset, a commercial asset, and then the tenant might default, and then you're left with an asset with no tenant, you got the debt on it. It's a stressful time, and you might be waiting 3 months to get a tenant back in there, and you might have to offer another 3-month rent incentive to get someone in there. Yeah. It's a different ball game, and obviously it's just a numbers scenario with a high level of due diligence. So it's just really important to scratch deeper with the commercial side and get your head around it, because as I said before, residential is easy to get your head around than commercial, but once you understand how commercial works, it's really numbers focused, and it's probably more easier to ascertain its value, its true value, because it's a business essentially.
Like what you talked about in our last podcast episodes, like just focus on the next step, like understand where you want to get to, but just focus on the next step and make the best play in the present moment of the next step that you need to do. And that could be, you get to 2 or 3 properties and you're like, I can get there, I can do this, move into a different investment class. At the same time, people might think, it's that's a slow, they might think it's a slow path. I think it's pretty decent. At the same time, you're waiting for you're putting your money to work and you're waiting for it to grow.
And that's a good point you hit on before too. So it's just there's strategies where a commercial straight off the bat is really good, and that's because they've got a lot of cash sitting on the sidelines doing nothing, and they're chasing that passive income goal. And if you're chasing that passive income goal, then that's your direct path. Just go straight there.
Yeah.
And then other strategies are if you've got 2 or 3 residentials, let's have a look at where that is in its own growth cycle. It might be really good to sell it down to then go into that higher income play, because you might really be at this stage in your life where it's seriously just one sell down and one purchase away from essentially traveling the world for the next 10 years, right? Depends on what your budget is.
100k, you could be one move away from. I think so many people don't understand how, that have maybe 1 or 2 properties. I don't think they understand how wealthy they really are and what they can do with it, because they could be one play away from not working.
Yep.
And that's what I talk about with one of our friends on our last podcast episode. I'm like, bro, I believe you could be not working, with some smart moves, and either now or very, very fast. And it's it just depends on where people are at, their comfortability levels, and then education. Through you buying 1 or 2 residential properties and you're waiting for them to grow, don't be waiting around. You've got this time to learn commercial. You've got so much time to just learn commercial, speak to people, listen to this pod, listen to other things, have a chat to different buyers agents, and that's what I'm doing. Is I'm just I'm calling up lenders, that are doing commercial loans, speaking to them. I'm speaking to different buyers agents and just sussing out the whole industry. Yeah, and
I've got one of my good mates. He's a senior commercial valuer, so we'll get him on the podcast.
Jakey.
And there's a lot of value in this space, and I just can't stress it enough. Commercial is great. It's also full of risks. Same as residential, same as life, really. Like I always disclaim it, but in reality, you got to have a go. It's not the hardest thing in the world. And if shit hits the fan and the world ends, as I said before, it never ends. The world will keep spinning on that front. But having the right people and the right team on your side to even ask those right questions, who see it every day. Like, you can be the most educated person in the room because you've read so many books, but I'm telling you now, just getting in and doing it, it'll fast track that education, and you'll learn more than any book will ever be able to tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. Theory versus action.
Yeah, there's a marriage of both, and people do sort of go in, like I get clients like, I want this and this and this and this in my next investment property, and it's like, okay, cool, you've read a lot of information, a lot of books.
You've been sold a lot of crap.
Yeah, and now you have this perfect pipe dream, so let's start breaking it down, and that's kind of where my, I guess, strategy sessions start pushing more into now with people, is just understanding what they've learned and then breaking it down further to see if that actually is what is best suited to them and their personality.
Yeah.
But there is some really key strategic ways to get into commercial, and going residential first to help build that deposit, because it's making your money work harder for you in that growth perspective. You can do the sell down strategy, and then you can also do the draw equity out strategy to get into commercial. But your commercial is your income play in property. I mean, you can go into the rooming house side of things, which I talk about, and that's basically a residential house with multiple rooms being rented out. You can also buy unit blocks. Any units over 3 units on one title, that's a commercial loan anyway. But if you're chasing passive income, the commercial route is just it's a far more efficient route, because it's a net lease. Your tenant pays your outgoings, so it reduces your level of personal time and maintenance required. And it's also in the tenant's best interest to look after the property for maintenance, because they're running their business out of it, so they've got clients coming and going.
I think we've spot on. Like leaning in on what you're just saying there is, we mentioned this a couple of podcast episodes ago, is like a lot of passive income streams. Like, a lot of people think that you need lots of passive income streams, when the reality is, like, if you've built a portfolio of 10 to 20 residential properties that are earning you, say 70 grand a year net after like waiting 15, 20 years, would you rather be owning that and managing that, say 20 residential properties, versus maybe 2 or 3 great assets that are in commercial that earn more money or the same amount of money? Like, it's why like just larger assets but less of them that perform better.
Yeah, well, performance too. Like, I mean, depends what you classify as performance.
Correct.
If you're wanting cash flow, commercial. If you're wanting capital growth, residential. If you want a mix of both, then let's talk about that and getting the best of both worlds and being more like diverse in your approach. And I always like diversity. I mean, if you get into any kind of investment sort of book or any education path that you could go down, they always talk about diversity, and there's no get rich quick scheme in my opinion. There's those that strike it rich quick, and there's probably a large level of their past that have led them to get to that point in the first place. But it's just talking to the right people in the day and taking the time to make the right decisions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's more to come on the commercial front. There's definitely a lot of value. This is sort of step one to go, well, those that are holding residential investment properties, you could be 1 or 2 deals away from hitting your income goal of 100,000 passive income per year. You just don't know until you start talking to the right people, and I mean, that's what we're here for. So please reach out. hello@propertypals.au is our email, and we'll put you in contact with the right people in this space. But and also if you have any comments, please leave them below. We'd love to get your feedback and learn, do, teach, share, grow in this world we're in.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. See you on the next one.
Bye for now.